The Israeli newspaper Haaretz released a startling investigation over the weekend. I guess. Startling only to people who didn't believe the many Palestinian eyewitnesses, medics, and doctors who had been making the same case all along. What the Haaretz investigation revealed is that what we have been seeing, and what we have been hearing about, is the result of a policy coming from at least some commanders in the field to deliberately shoot at, or shoot toward, starving Palestinian aid seekers at and around the aid centers related to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We are joined by Amir Taiban, a columnist at Haaretz, and Dave Smith. Later in this interview, we're going to talk about Amir's latest column on Netanyahu and Trump. But we want to start here with this Haaretz investigation. Amir, how has this been resonating in Israel? This feels like a piece that broke through in a way that some had not in the past. But maybe that's just my own hope coloring my analysis. First of all, this is an investigation by three of my colleagues Nir Hassan, Yaniv Kubovich, and Bar Pelagand. I want to give them the due credit for the hard work that they did here. It's mostly based on interviews with soldiers, with people on the ground who are eyewitnesses to the very disturbing reality that has developed around the question of aid distribution in Gaza. And all these incidents where you have people being killed from gunfire. Now, the investigation doesn't say that this is exclusively the IDF. It doesn't rule out the claim that we've heard from the Israeli side that Hamas has also targeted people near the aid centers or some of the workers. But it definitely includes testimonies from soldiers who say that they were given orders to fire live ammunition. Let's say, at least in the vicinity of the aid distribution centers. And I really think it's just worth reading. It's a very, very strong article. There's been strong pushback against it. But what's interesting to note is that I've seen at least one military reporter for Channel 14, which is a very right-leaning, pro-Netanyahu media outlet, who, after denouncing the investigation in Haaretz, basically said that some of the orders and some of the rules of engagement when soldiers can open fire around the distribution centers were changed after the publication of the story. It's a weird way to try to debunk something, if you're saying it's not true, but, by the way, it has led to changes in policy. From my point of view, I think what it really shows is that speaking now from an Israeli perspective, this is a war that has exhausted itself. I don't understand. As somebody who lived on the border with Gaza before October 7th and still plans to go back and live in that part of Israel when the war is over, how this actually makes my family safer. There are other elements of this war, and war is always a terrible thing, but there are elements of it where I would read a story and say, you know, this is terrible. But we were attacked. And this is war. And this is difficult. I think we're at a point today where it seems like the war really has exhausted itself. And these incidents are one glaring example of it. If you will. Do you have a sense of the motivation behind giving orders like this? It's one of the things that's really dumbfounding to me. You have so much pushback internationally on the destruction of Gaza and the treatment of the Palestinian people. What is the benefit of ordering IDF soldiers to shoot live ammunition into a group of civilians looking for food? So, first of all, I want to be very, very cautious here with the wording, because I think what we know is that soldiers were given orders to fire, let's say, in that direction. We don't necessarily know that they were told, go and kill people. But the thing here is that we are at a point where you have this war of attrition in Gaza. From the Israeli perspective, we are losing a lot of soldiers there. And a lot of them are young people who have been in this endless war situation since they joined the army. Their life is genuinely in danger. When you are in a situation like that, a lot of times you're thinking, Okay. I'm going to take extra precaution as a commander to try to protect my soldiers. And if the soldiers are in this kind of stalemate, with very little movement, they see danger everywhere. Gaza today is basically tons of rubble and destroyed buildings. And they are being faced with explosives, landmines, RPGs, and things like that. So there's this heightened sense of danger. And that a lot of times will lead to decisions that, for me as a civilian, I look at and say, this is not leading us anywhere. But for a soldier in the field, on the ground, you're likely much more focused on your own survival. And I think this is one of the issues at hand here. When I look at it, I say, first of all, this is terrible. And second of all, I take it up to the government, not to the soldiers on the ground. Again, this is from my perspective. I take it to the government and say, what are you sending these people to do at this point? What is this achieving for us? For Israel as a country? The tank shells, to me, add a layer of depravity to the orders. I think no aid organization on earth thinks that using live ammunition and firing warning shots at aid seekers is an effective way to do aid distribution. You've never heard of World Central Kitchen saying, no. We apologize for the 37 people that were killed. We were firing warning shots. And it turned out that we killed 37 and wounded 72. That has never in the history of aid distribution happened. But even setting aside the live ammunition warning shots, firing shells toward civilian crowds is guaranteed to lead to casualties. At least significant numbers of people wounded unless there's some miraculous situation where it lands nowhere near them. But I take your point that I imagine the soldiers are saying, who cares? There's a risk to us. Or we perceive a risk to us. And we might as well fire. I think. Again. You can look at the tactical question. Why did this specific tank fire? And honestly, I wouldn't have the answer. I would assume it was because they felt they were in danger. But I think the bigger question is what is happening with this entire experiment of changing the mechanism of aid distribution. I remind you. About 100 days ago, when the war in Gaza was renewed after the ceasefire collapsed because Netanyahu chose to renew the war, this was presented, at least domestically to people in Israel and I think also on the international scene, as the big game changer. You would have this supposedly neutral, but in fact very much aligned with the Israeli and American governments, aid organization, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, take over the aid distribution. Hamas would no longer be able to control it. They wouldn't be able to loot and steal the aid. Everything would be run through these encampments. All very professional. And a lot of aid organizations that have more experience working in Gaza and elsewhere in the world said this doesn't make any sense. This is going to turn out to be a disaster. They gave several reasons for their warnings. One was that you would have Hamas on the one hand trying to stop it, and on the other hand, the Israeli soldiers were supposed to bring some layer of protection to these centers. If you have any situation where they start firing at one another, this becomes a bloodbath. And I think after 100 days since the war was renewed, I don't see the big change on the ground. I see people still dying every day. I see the hostages still held by Hamas. And Hamas hasn't budged in their position that the war must end in order to have the release of all the hostages. And we are still seeing, apart from these aid distribution centers and everything happening around them, trucks coming into Gaza and being looted. One of the explanations you're reading now in the Israeli media is that it's not Hamas doing the looting. It's local clans, or you know, Clan can be a nice word for a crime organization. I'm not sure how that's better. Honestly. But it's become a dystopian nightmare. Really. And again. To me. It all comes back to the fundamental question, why is this war continuing? Why aren't we getting to a deal that would bring back the hostages and end this insanity? This conversation highlights a profound and painful truth, in the fog of war. The lines between protection and aggression, between strategy and desperation, can become tragically blurred. The investigation from Haaretz serves as a crucial beam of light, cutting through the official narratives and forcing a confrontation with the reality on the ground, a reality where hunger itself can become a death sentence. Yet, even amidst this darkness, there is a glimmer of hope. It exists in the courage of journalists who risk everything to uncover the truth. It resonates in the voices of conscience, like Amir's, who from within their own society ask the most difficult and necessary questions. Why are we doing this? Who does this make safer? True security, for any people, is not forged in the crucible of endless conflict or built upon the suffering of others. It is found in the difficult, painstaking work of building a future where every family can plan to return home, where every child can expect to live, and where the insanity of war finally gives way to the simple, profound logic of peace. It is in the pursuit of that future that our shared humanity is truly found. If you value these kinds of in-depth discussions and believe in the power of independent journalism to hold power to account, please consider supporting our work. Hit the like button. Leave a comment with your thoughts below. And subscribe to our channel to get the full, ad-free show every morning. You can sign up at breakingpoints.com. Thank you for watching and for being part of this critical conversation.